Hi there, and welcome to the Easy English Podcast. I'm Lisa, and I'm so excited to be your guide for today's fun and useful topic, how to speak like a native English speaker. Let me begin by asking you a couple of questions. Have you ever thought about why native speakers talk so effortlessly? Do you want to sound more natural when you speak English? And most importantly, are you ready to take your speaking skills up a notch? Today we're going to explore a few practical tips and strategies that will help you improve your pronunciation, tone, and rhythm so that your English sounds more like that of a native speaker. But keep in mind, it's not about getting rid of your unique accent. It's really about speaking more clearly and confidently. Let's begin with one of the most essential elements of natural speech, pronunciation. A helpful tip is to carefully listen to how native speakers say words. For instance, many native speakers don't clearly pronounce every single letter in word. Instead, they often link their words together. Here's an example. Instead of saying each word slowly like, "What do you want to do?" native speakers usually say something more like, "What do you want to do?" It's quicker, more relaxed, and it sounds more natural. This is called linking, and it's a key part of native speech. To get better at this, listen to podcasts, movies, or conversations where native speakers are talking. Notice how they blend or shorten words, then try repeating what you hear. Copying others is one of the best ways to train your ear and improve your pronunciation. Now let's move on to intonation. Native speakers don't speak in a flat tone. They use their voice to express emotion and emphasis. Take this sentence. I love learning English. Notice how my voice rises on the word love? That's intonation. It makes your speech sound more interesting and expressive. To practice intonation, read sentences out loud and pay attention to where your voice naturally rises or falls. You can also copy the intonation patterns from native speakers in shows or YouTube videos. Another useful tip is to get familiar with idioms and expressions. Native speakers often use phrases that aren't meant to be taken literally, like, "It's raining cats and dogs," or "break a leg." These phrases give your English more flavor and help you sound more fluent. Start by learning a few idioms and try using them during your conversations. Last but definitely not least, don't forget about confidence. Even if you make mistakes, keep going. Native speakers respect your effort, and the more you practice, the more natural you'll start to sound. So, are you ready to start speaking? More like a native. Stick around, and I'll walk you through each tip step by step. Let's keep going. Awesome. Now that we've covered some of the basics, let's go a little deeper into something just as important: the use of phrases and expressions that native speakers commonly use. But before we dive into those, I'd like to tell you a personal story. It might help you see how these expressions show up in real life. When I was learning English, I used to have this habit of trying to speak perfectly all the time. I believed every single word needed to be pronounced clearly, and all my grammar had to be spot on. But the more I listened to native speakers, the more I realized they didn't always talk in that perfect way I imagined. I remember once being at a cafe in London and overhearing two native speakers talking. They were chatting about the weather, very typical in England, and one of them said, "I'm absolutely freezing." At first, I thought they meant it, literally, like they were sitting in a freezer. But then I realized they were just talking about a chilly day. They weren't being literal. They were just using freezing to emphasize how cold they felt. This kind of exaggeration is really common in English conversations, and it makes speech sound more colorful and engaging. I remember wondering, why don't they just say, "I'm cold"? But after hearing that style again and again, I finally got it. Native speakers love to use expressive language to make things sound more lively. That was a big moment for me. I started doing the same thing. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," I began saying, "I'm absolutely exhausted." It felt more real, more like how native speakers talk. Another key to sounding more native is learning phrasal verbs. These are made up of a verb and a preposition or adverb, and they're super common in daily English. When I was starting out, I really struggled with these. Phrasal verbs like pick up, turn on, or give up confused me because the meaning isn't always clear from the words themselves. Like pick up, sometimes it means to collect something, other times it means to learn something. I'll give you a quick story that helped me. One day, I was at a friend's place and it was getting late, so I said, "I think I should go." But my friend replied, "Why don't you hang out a bit longer?" I didn't know what hang out meant at the time, but then it hit me. It just meant spend time together. I was a little embarrassed, but I made a note to remember it, and the next time I was with friends, I used it myself. Over time, I picked up more and more of these expressions, and they really helped me sound more fluent. Phrasal verbs are one of the most useful tools for speaking naturally. And the funny part is, native speakers don't even realize how often they use them. But once you start using them too, your English will start to sound a lot more authentic. Another great tip: relaxed speech. Native speakers tend to talk fast and often drop or blend sounds. For instance, instead of saying, "I have to go to the store," you'll hear, "I have to go to the store," or even, "gotta go to the store." This used to confuse me because I came from a background where every word is clearly pronounced. Speaking fast felt strange at first, but then I remembered something. A few years back, I went on a road trip in the US with some friends. We stopped at a gas station, and one of them said, "Gotta get some snacks." At first, I couldn't understand what he said. But then I realized it's just a quick way of saying, "I have to get some snacks." This casual speech style is another major trait of native English. You can improve by watching fast-paced shows or listening to native conversations. Focus on how they blend their words, and try to copy that. You don't need to speak super fast, but understanding this rhythm will help you sound more natural, and you'll also understand native speakers more easily. So to sound like a native, practice phrasal verbs, expressive phrases, and relaxed speech. Listen closely, imitate, and don't be afraid to experiment. Keep going. Now, one more crucial element of native speech: the rhythm and flow of English. This part was especially tricky for me. At first, I tried to speak slowly and clearly, but it just didn't sound right. Native speakers have a flow to their speech, and I couldn't quite figure it out until I really paid attention. For example, when someone says, "How are you doing today?" they don't say it with a flat tone. Some words get more stress than others. In that sentence, doing is usually stressed more because it's the main verb. The other words are softer, and that creates a natural rhythm in the sentence. I finally noticed this while watching a show. The actors weren't just speaking clearly, they were adding movement to their voices. Their sentences rose and fell, and that made the speech more dynamic. One thing that helped me was shadowing. This means listening to a native speaker and repeating exactly what they say. Same speed, same rhythm, same tone. At first it's tough, but trust me, it works. You'll start to feel the flow of natural English, and over time, it'll become second nature. Let's also talk about linking sounds, another big one. Native speakers often blend words together. For example, instead of saying, "Can you help me?" clearly they might say, "Can you help me?" The N from can flows into the Y of you. It makes the sentence sound smoother. This linking happens all the time. Think of phrases like gonna for going to or wanna for want to. They're just shortened versions that are easier to say. At first I struggled with this because I thought it meant I was being lazy with my pronunciation. But over time I realized it's not lazy, it's just natural. Linking helps you sound more fluent. Another related point, informal contractions. These are super common in everyday speech. For example, instead of saying, "I am going to the store," you'll hear, "I'm gonna go to the store." Or "I will" becomes "I'll." When I first heard gonna, I thought it was incorrect, but then I realized, nope, it's totally normal. And now I use it all the time. Try starting with common ones like gonna, gotta, and wanna. They're easy to use and instantly make your speech more natural. And finally, the most important thing I learned: confidence. In the beginning, I was always afraid of messing up. I didn't want people to hear my accent or think I wasn't fluent. But eventually, I realized something. Native speakers don't mind mistakes. They admire your effort and they know that learning a language is a process. Once I let go of fear and simply started speaking, I found myself feeling much more at ease with the language. The more confident I grew, the simpler it became to apply all the tips and techniques I had learned. I began to sound more natural. As a result, confidence doesn't mean being perfect. It means having the courage to speak, make mistakes, and keep improving. So, to speak like a native speaker, remember to focus on things like rhythm, linking sounds, using contractions, and speaking with confidence. These are the secret ingredients that make your English sound more fluent and natural. Keep practicing. Listen to native speakers and don't hesitate to experiment with new expressions. The more you practice, the closer you'll get to sounding like a native. Continuing with tips to help you speak more like a native speaker, let's talk about intonation. Native speakers naturally vary their pitch to express emotions, emphasize certain words, or simply make their speech flow better. For instance, when someone says "really" with a rising tone, they might be showing surprise. The tone of voice creates the question, even if the word itself isn't a traditional question word. When I started learning English, I struggled with intonation. I spoke in a flat tone, almost like I was reading a book out loud. But over time, I learned that how you say something is just as important as the words you use. Now I make a conscious effort to vary my pitch to sound more expressive. I encourage you to listen to native speakers, observe how they stress certain words, and mimic their intonation. It'll make your conversation sound more natural. Next, let's discuss natural pauses. Native English speakers often pause briefly while speaking. These pauses help them collect their thoughts and also give the listener time to absorb what's being said. For example, someone might say, "Well, I think it's going to rain later," with a slight pause after, "well." These small pauses make conversations sound more relaxed and easygoing. When I was learning, I felt like I had to speak without stopping, but I quickly realized that pausing is actually part of how native speakers communicate. Try slowing down your speech and inserting pauses where they feel natural. One great way to practice is by repeating lines from your favorite shows or podcasts and copying the way the speakers pause. It becomes easier with time. Another important tip is reducing words. Native speakers often drop or blend sounds, especially when speaking quickly. For example, instead of saying, "What do you want to do?" they might say, "Whatcha wanna do?" Want to becomes wanna, and going. To becomes gonna. This kind of word reduction is common in casual English and helps you sound more fluent and less formal. At first, I avoided reductions because I worried they'd make me sound unclear or lazy. But soon I realized native speakers use them all the time. It's just how natural spoken English works. So if you want to sound more native, try using reductions in your conversations. It'll make your speech smoother and more authentic. Let's also talk about context. Native speakers often change how they speak based on who they're talking to and where they are. They'll use different expressions with friends than they would with a boss or teacher. They adjust their tone, vocabulary, and even sentence structure, depending on the setting. This was something I had to learn over time. I remember being in a work meeting and saying, "Yeah, I think it's fine," but I noticed my coworkers looked surprised. That's when I realized my tone was too casual for that situation. After that, I started practicing how to sound more formal in professional settings while still keeping my speech natural and relaxed with friends. Learning when to be formal or casual made me feel more confident in different conversations. Storytelling is another great way to improve your English. Native speakers often use storytelling to engage their listeners. When I was learning, I noticed how they'd add dramatic pauses or exaggerate parts of a story to make it more entertaining. Storytelling can make your speech more dynamic and is a fun way to build fluency. Try telling a simple story from your day, like going to the store. Add some details to make it interesting. As you get more comfortable, use expressions and varied intonation to make the story vivid. Storytelling isn't just fun. It's a powerful tool for speaking more naturally. Another key to sounding like a native speaker is using common expressions and phrases. These help you sound more familiar with everyday English. For instance, instead of saying, "I'm going to the store," a native speaker might say, "I'm heading to the store." Heading to is just a more relaxed way of saying going to, and you'll hear it all the time. When I started learning, my sentences were very formal, just like what I read in textbooks. But after spending time around native speakers, I realized they spoke much more casually. For example, instead of saying, "I'm very tired," you might hear someone say, "I'm exhausted." It's a stronger, more natural way to express the same thing. Another example. In formal English, you might say, "How are you today?" But a native speaker might say, "How's it going?" or "What's up?" These casual phrases make conversations feel friendlier and more natural. At first, I thought they were too informal, but now I use them all the time. Let's not forget contractions. Native speakers use them constantly. Instead of saying, "I am going to the store," they say, "I'm going to the store." Instead of, "I will call you later," it becomes, "I'll call you later." This makes speech flow more smoothly and sound more natural. I remember being confused when I first heard contractions. I thought they were just shortcuts. But as I listened more and started speaking with natives, I saw how essential they are. Avoiding contractions can actually make you sound too formal or even robotic. So try to use them whenever possible. Another useful tip is to get comfortable using phrasal verbs. These are combinations of a verb and a preposition, and they're incredibly common. For instance, instead of saying, "I will start working on the project," a native speaker might say, "I'll get started on the project." Instead of, "I don't understand," they might say, "I don't get it." At first, I found phrasal verbs confusing. They didn't always follow predictable rules. But over time, I noticed how often native speakers use them. Learning to use phrasal verbs made my English sound more natural and conversational. Let's go back to intonation for a moment. It really does matter. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice when you speak. It shows emotion, helps form questions, and highlights important words. For example, "I can't believe it," with a rising tone sounds excited or shocked. The same sentence with a falling tone can sound disappointed. When I first learned English, I didn't pay attention to intonation. But listening to native speakers helped me realize how much of a difference it makes. Now, I try to adjust my pitch depending on what I'm saying. If I'm surprised, I raise my voice at the end of the sentence. If I'm just making a statement, I lower it. This small change helps my English sound more real. Finally, engage in everyday conversations. Native speakers don't always talk about deep topics. They often chat about simple things like the weather, their plans, or how they feel. You'll hear things like, "It's so hot today," or "I'm heading to the gym later." These small talk moments are great for practicing your fluency. When I first started speaking with native speakers, I was nervous about small talk. I thought I had to say something important every time, but I realized small talk is just a way to connect. Now I actually enjoy it and use it as a way to improve. To sum it up, speaking like a native is about more than just vocabulary. It's about using contractions, phrasal verbs, common expressions, and practicing intonation. When you do that, your English will sound more comfortable and fluent. Well, that's it for today. I hope these tips help you feel more confident in your English. Remember, it's all about consistent practice and paying attention to how native speakers talk in real life. The more you listen, the more you'll pick up, and before long, these things will become second nature. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment with your thoughts or any questions you have. I'd love to hear your own English learning experiences and which tips helped you the most. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every time you speak, you're getting one step closer to sounding like a native. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Easy English Podcast. Until next time, happy learning.